Kamala Harris is now running for governor of California, and I support that, and I want to tell you why. First of all, there are some crumbs within her statement about this, but ultimately, I need us to understand that the policies that were pushed by Kamala Harris, even when she was running for president, was through professional ethics. That is because she was the vice president of the president. And although we can criticize the fact that she should have disconnected, the reality is that there's still people within law firms that bend the knee who probably disagree with this administration, but that's their job, and there is questions of why don't you leave that job. But ultimately, you go into a job with the responsibilities of that job, and you put away your own personal opinion. This is what the Michigan governor actually said. I forgot her name. I'm sorry, Michigan. But ultimately, she said that she's going to be appeasing the president because her duty is to go for what's best for the state, not what's best for the party or what's best for her, right? So ultimately, this is a consensus that is something that is inherited within our political officials where they believe that they have no other option but to follow the status quo. And this isn't particular to Kamala Harris, but something that has been inherited within political reality. An example, being pro-Zio is an individual take in government. It is an inherited take. So inherited means that it was viewed as something that is naturally American, right? It is our existential need for Israel to exist. And while I do not agree with that, and there is actually, facts and realities that disagree with that. The reality is that they've been fed that information that we need Israel in order for the United States to be successful, that they've positioned that as a foreign policy that is above even foreign policy, but national security, right? They try to restrict freedom of speech, the right to protest because of national security, which is what? The security of Israel, which in itself is incompatible with the fact that Israel is not a constitutional beneficiary, right? But ultimately, this was mostly the fault of former President Biden, but ultimately it goes beyond him because it's inherited from before him. The reality that people were critical that she went on to be the nominee because she didn't win a primary is ridiculous because you don't have to like a rule and regulation, but that doesn't mean that it's unconstitutional, which is what people on the left kind of promoted, right? The fact that we have a democratic right to not vote for anyone, and look where we are at, right? But ultimately, there is no such thing as a perfect candidate. And, I go against purity because ultimately, no candidate is going to be perfect, but we do have to hold them accountable, right? But it's important to understand where she was coming from and what restricted her, right? Being a black woman within this space, if she was the one who went against tradition and decorum, that would not only be consequential on her, but on black Americans in politics, right? And I'm not justifying it, but I need us to understand the factors that kind of produce a sort of mentality where you have to be perfect, right? I understand that from a just Latino standpoint where what you do can be consequential to the community as a whole. But let's go to her crumbs. I'm a devout public servant, and from the earliest days of my career, I have believed that the best way I could make a difference in people's lives and fight for a better future was to improve the system from within. That's a crumb because it tells us that that was her initial belief, right? This book by Debbie Hines, Get Off My Neck, Black Lives, White Justice, and a Former Prosecutor's Quest for Reform, literally tells us that. And Kamala Harris was also a prosecutor where they go in wanting to change from within. And then you recognize as a prosecutor, you aren't working for the people of the state, you are working for the state itself, even if that is against the people. And you yourself as a prosecutor are the one, interpreting the laws, you are the one prosecuting them. So you don't get to question why is it that this is much more, severe than the other thing, because your job is to prosecute for the state, not for the people. And what's exciting about the fact that she's positioning that I have given serious thought to asking the people of California for the privilege to serve as their governor. I love the state, its people, and its promise. It is my home, but after deep reflection, I've decided that I will not run for governor this election. What this positions, from what I position in the front, is that in not being in politics, well, I don't know what her next moves is, but the next page will kind of guide us to that. But in not being in politics, that removes the shackles that you get within the status quo to only go for the status quo. And in the second image tells us that she's navigating those strategies. I have extraordinary admiration and respect for those who dedicate their lives to public service to their communities and to our nation. At the same time, we must recognize that our politics, our government, and our institutions have too often failed the American people, culminating in this moment of crisis. Note, as someone with a law background, I'm sure that she understood the severity of having the Gaza policy that she did. But ultimately, American jurisprudence, American law, is obedience to superior orders. That was the president. So if he said there was no G side, that was the law. Ultimately, we're seeing that from the Trump presidency that when he tells administrative agencies and his cabinet, this is how it is, that's how it is. So ultimately, that's also what happened during Biden. It's not because of Biden himself, it is powers that have been inherited from a culmination of political destabilization against the constitutional design, right? As we look ahead, we must be willing to pursue change through new methods and fresh thinking. That's what I've told you. That's what I've told you. Unprecedented conflict requires unprecedented solutions, right? We cannot utilize the traditional means like legislation, like lawsuits, in order to fix this. It's going to require new thinking. It's going to require new methods. And I love that Kamala Harris is affirming this because I've been feeling like crazy, insane, like I'm, making things up, but I'm not recreating the political wheel. This is things that we have inherited, solutions we have inherited. Committed to our same values and principles, but not bound by the same playbook. I think this is giving us crumbs as to what she's going to pursue next. And I think I'm excited for it because I think it's not going to have the chains of politics because she's going to be capable of utilizing her legal experience in order to drive us somewhere in a different avenue. For now, my leadership and public service will not be an elected office. I look forward to getting back out and listening to the American people, helping elect Democrats across the nation who will fight fearlessly and sharing more details in the months ahead about my own plans. So she still has plans. We don't know that yet. But in the United States of America, power must lie with the people. With the people, that's what I'm telling us. The fixing of this is going to be bottom up, right? The reality that he's positioning all of these life appointments, it can make you crash out. But instead of thinking of how the fire is spreading and taking note of where it's spreading, you have to figure out how do you stop the fire. And we, the people, must use our power to fight for freedom, opportunity, fairness, and the dignity of all. I will remain in that fight. So that tells us some crumbs, right? It tells us some crumbs, and hopefully it's not public office. And not because I don't want her in public office, but because I believe that she can maximize on her power outside of the status quo, right? Because ultimately, if she goes into the status quo, she's going to be under that threshold of even the Democratic Party, right? Which is what people like Jasmine Crockett and AOC are restricted through the Democratic mandate. So ultimately, that can be exciting. I guess we'll have to see. But really, I guess the point is that within the policies that can be criticized that Kamala Harris pushed onto her presidency campaign, it's important to understand that the Zio position is something that has been inherited as being something that is essential to American advancement and success. And that doesn't mean that it's true, but it does mean that they've been fed that lie from politicians beforehand. So the fact they think that it's our geostrategic priority to really defend Israel no matter what it does, that isn't a Kamala Harris policy, not even a Joe Biden policy. It is a policy that has been long ago been, decided by both parties and the status quo. So that's something that we have to fight against, but it's important to understand that this is beyond one individual like Kamala Harris. It is something that is systematic.